Hi, this is Nell, illustrator slash animator slash generic creative and now 3D printing enthusiast. In a previous video I mentioned I decided to gamify my life at the end of 2019, choosing Death Stranding as a theme. The same way my boy Sam puts a star on his pants every time he maxes out a prepper in the game, the same way I'm putting a star on myself every time I finish a personal project. So far, I've completed 15 projects and now it's time for number 16. Since 3D printing is the area I'm venturing now, I decided one of my projects will be a Death Stranding 3D figurine. The logical choice, of course, will be to sculpt Sam, and indeed I connected with this character in ways that are hard to explain. However, one ID monster already beat me to it, and look at what he did with Sam in here. Boy, that project is amazing. Although I am indeed intimidated by the fact I won't be able to top that in a million years, that was not the main reason why I decided to spare Sam this time for this project. I decided to sculpt Deadman instead, and I have very special reasons for that. As you know, Deadman is a character who was 3D modeled to look like Guillermo del Toro. I don't think I need to introduce him. Everyone has seen at least one of the several amazing movies he has directed so far. But I am not sure if the world outside of Mexico is aware of how awesome he is, not only as a director but as a human being. As you might or might not know, Guillermo is Mexican. He was born in the same city where I live, and he has done so much for the local community that he is seen as a local hero by many. You will hardly find a Mexican who talks crap about him, and here is why. Teaming up with the International Cinema Festival held in Morelia, he created the Guillermo del Toro Scholarship, which is a fund that covers the student fees and life expenses of gifted animators to study in Goblins, which is arguably the best 2D animation school in the world. Ram Tames was one of the winners of said scholarship in 2018. As a result, he was part of the team that animated La Bestia, which is a very touching short film. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it. Guillermo also founded the Jenkins del Toro Scholarship to aid young promises to study cinematography anywhere in the world, and founded the International Center of Animation, informally named El Taller del Chucho, which means the dog's workshop, which is currently working on his new Pinocchio film and is partly funded by him. When the Mexican Math Society tweeted they required donations so they could cover the plane tickets needed to compete in the International Math Olympics held in South Africa in 2019, Guillermo del Toro offered himself to buy all the tickets for the team. The kids won 8 medals, which was cited as the best performance from Mexico on record. Guillermo also covered himself the plane ticket of one of the winners of his scholarships, which on itself covers the stay in France and the Goblin's fees, but not the plane tickets. When Guillermo realized the student didn't have the means to cover the trip and was asking around to borrow money, he decided to buy it himself. Guillermo also offered to pay for the accommodation of the Mexican hockey female team to compete in Japan after the team complained on Twitter they did not receive the funds from the government commission that was meant to cover said expenses, and as a consequence they were stranded in Japan without a place to stay. And these stories are just some of many other acts of charity he has performed for people in need. During the International Film Festival of Guadalajara in 2018, Guillermo held a master class for 100,000 people for free, which you can watch in the Film Festival YouTube channel if you want to practice your Spanish. He also held some free dates and dynamics for free tickets for his exhibition En Casa con Mis Monstruos, which exhibits the original props of his movies, plus items of his personal collection. It is known that Guillermo and Hideo Kojima are friends. They have created amazing things together before. When Konami and Hideo split up due to creative differences, Hideo decided to go solo and founded his indie game studio, relying on money out of his home pocket and the help of as many friends as he could get on board. One of them was Guillermo, who was the one who convinced Norma Reedus to collaborate.
Guillermo del Toro called me and he goes, there's a guy named Hideo who's gonna call you, just say yes.
Right.
And I was like, who is he? He goes, does not matter, just say yes. And then he also came to, there's a lot of San Diego in this, but he also came to San Diego with an iPad and was showing me the things he was working on, and I just said yes, right off the bat.
Yeah, as you were told, just say yes to Hideo. Yeah.
I mean, Guillermo gave me my first movie, so I do everything Guillermo tells me to do.
You can also notice the influence in the plot, or at least some common ideas. During the exhibition in Casa con mis monstruos, Guillermo has a catchphrase that makes you ponder. Monsters are us, on which he further expands by stating that many times the beings we consider scary and gruesome are just living beings with unique personalities and feelings, only different from us in appearance, and how our own prejudice prompts us to see them as monsters without giving them a second look, and doing that makes us the actual monsters. You can see this idea with the BTs, who are super scary at first encounter, but later on you realize it is just people who died and can't go to the other side, so they are stranded between two worlds, just floating around in nothingness. So whenever a living person gets close by, they try to reach out and hold on for dear life, just like you would if you were drifting away in the open sea. Death Stranding is also a game that pushes collaboration and helping others, which, as we can see, is a philosophy of life Guillermo subscribes to. So yeah, for all these reasons I decided to sculpt him, so without further ado, here comes my figurine process. Step 1. Sculpting. I gathered picture references from the game and some real-life photos before I began to sculpt. I started with the character in a T-pose, given the symmetry feature in ZBrush helped with sculpting faster. I created a subtool for each area I considered will be easier to model separately. I also found it easier to model the BB pod in a separate file, and once done, I incorporated it to my main file. Once I had all the elements I needed to sculpt, I posed the character. Step 2. Preparing OBJs for 3D printing. Once I was done with my sculpt, I checked if I could get away with remeshing each piece to reduce the number of polygons. Given the more polygons you have in your mesh, the harder it is for Chitubox to process the print. Once I made sure my mesh was not above 1 million polys, I combined all subtools in a single mesh one by one, checking the geometry will fuse between them using the remesh by union option, and then checking there is no hiding debris on it by showing just the selected mesh and then hit the delete hidden button, doing this process as many times as needed. Once done, I exported the file as an OBJ. For the final printed model, I wanted to incorporate light to the BB pod, but my knowledge of LEDs and all things electrical is next to nothing, so I thought about a workaround, which I found in the shape of LED earrings, which you can buy from Amazon, or if you're low on budget and high on patience, you can get them from AliExpress. I measured the earrings and scaled up the model in proportion so the earrings could fit the BB pod, which resulted in a model way bigger than the printing capacity of my Saturn. So I observed the model, figured out the pieces I will need to separate it into, and came back to my previous ZBrush file to make the separation. Once I had the pieces, I exported each one as an OBJ, brought them to Blender, scaled them up, and created the union shape geometry of each part in there since I find Blender more intuitive for booleans. I made sure there was 1 or 2 millimeters of difference between the parts so they could fit between them without problem. This included the ensembling part of the BB pod and the hole for the LED earring. Once I had my pieces ready, I checked all normals were facing outside, then exported them in OBJ format and checked them in Mesh Mixer, fixing the parts that mark errors. Step 3. Preparing print files in Chitubox. I created 3 different files for printing this figurine, properly hollowing the pieces, creating holes and supports for each. The first file contains the base and the legs. The second contains the torso, the head and everything BB, and the third, the BB pod cover and the glasses, which we're going to be printing a different type of resin. Step 4. Printing. The skin colored any cubic resin parts took 38 hours to print in total, plus another 3 hours for the clear parts. Step 5. Washing and curing. I finished a whole liter of isopropyl alcohol on this one, and once the liquid resin was washed out, I left the pieces out in the sun to cure. Step 6. Cut the supports. Once my prints were cured, I took the clamp that came with my Saturn and cut the supports carefully one by one. Since this was a big print, I had to put thicker supports, so just applying pressure and then for them to break wouldn't do this time. Step 7. Sanding. I used fine-grained sandpaper to get rid of the small points the resin left where the supports were attached before, applying pressure gently in a circular motion and trying my best to cover just the protruding area. Step 8. Painting and assembling. I got myself acrylic paint in basic colors to mix and match, plus some brick red for the medical uniform and some nail polish for the glossy parts, black for the top, uncolored for the coat. I've heard you get a better result if you primer your prints, but I didn't do that this time. Since I'm an illustrator, I like the stroke finish that acrylics leave when painting using brushes, but if you want a uniform look, maybe airbrushing will be better for you. Now, since I have a lot of footage of this process, and my friend Jeffrey made an amazing cover of Asylums of the Feeling, a song featuring Death Stranding that is very in tune with the vibes of the game, I'll leave you with it. Since I am a beginner in this journey, mistakes were made. I am summarizing what I did wrong next, so you don't have to. Mistake number 1. Not putting enough escape holes. Before I made the big versions with a glowing BB pod, I tried the smaller one that could be printed in my Saturn in one go. After hollowing the piece, I put just one tiny hole at the bottom for the resin to leak out and made the whole base solid. This made it extremely difficult to separate from the building plate. It took forever. I had to use a hammer to get the metal scraper to work, and my plate now looks like it has a moon tattooed. Besides, the ink-grade resin from inside kept leaking out weeks after the print was ready, which is not a good thing. Mistake number 2. Miscalculating holes. This is more of a trial and error thing. As you know, resins have a shrinkage percentage, plus a tendency to expand or contract depending on the settings you place in your Chitubox file. In my case, the printed models grew thicker than prospected for about 1 millimeter, so the hole I planned for the earring ended up smaller than originally designed. So I had to print the BB pod again with larger holes, so once printed they will shrink to size. Mistake number 3. Too much time washing in alcohol. Since I had been doing this with the skin color resin without noticing any change, I assumed that the time you put your prints in alcohol didn't really affect the print that much. However, I noticed my clear resin prints became cloudy, and the more they spent submerged in alcohol, the less see-through they became. Mistake number 4. Not putting enough supports. Sometimes when you do not place enough supports, part of your print will fall and cure flat to the bottom, or gravity will cause for your print to tear, which is what happened with this particular earring here. Since I didn't have enough resin left to try a second print, and given everything else came out perfect, I decided to pull out my inner papyrus and make this a happy little accident. So yeah, it's not that my print failed, it's that BTs are quite rude when trying to hold you. Yep, that's it. So this will be it. Hope you find it useful, and any tips and tricks that you have that can make this process better, please add them in the comments below. I'm happy to keep on learning. Thank you for watching and have a fantastic day.